There was a sound that used to move across America every Friday afternoon at exactly 3:15. It was the sound of a school bell, and for about 4 seconds after it rang, kids in California and kids in Georgia and kids in Ohio were all feeling the exact same thing at the exact same time. Pure, uncomplicated release. If you grew up in the 80s or 90s, you know that sound still lives somewhere in your chest. And today we're going to talk about what happened to it. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about Friday nights. They weren't just the end of the school week or the start of the weekend. They were a destination. An emotional one. Monday through Thursday belonged to somebody else, to teachers, to bosses, to homework and alarm clocks and the daily grind of just getting through it. But Friday belonged to you. And the strange, beautiful part is that it didn't matter where you lived. A kid in a Georgia farmhouse and a kid in a Chicago apartment building were both walking through their front door with that same electric feeling, like the whole world had just exhaled at once. So let's go back there for a minute. Let's remember what it actually felt like. For a lot of families, Friday night started with a negotiation. Not a big one, but a real one. Somebody had to decide which video store you were going to. Maybe it was the local place on the corner, run by a guy who knew your family by name and always had an opinion about what you should rent. Or maybe it was the big one, Blockbuster, with its blue and yellow sign glowing in the parking lot like a beacon. Either way, this wasn't a passive decision. You had to get in the car. You had to walk the aisles. You had to actually hold the box in your hands, read the back, argue with your brother or your sister about whether you were getting the comedy or the horror movie, and then you had to pay for it. Real money, for a tape you'd have to return in 3 days, and because you'd invested something, time, gas money, a little bit of your allowance, you were locked in. You watched that movie. All the way through. Even if it turned out to be terrible, you watched it, because you'd earned it and you weren't about to waste it. That's a feeling that's almost impossible to explain to anyone who didn't live it. The weight of a choice you couldn't just swipe away. And what did you eat while you watched it? If you were lucky, it was Friday night at Pizza Hut, sliding into one of those booths under the red roof, the smell of that thin crust and marinara hitting you before you even sat down. Or maybe your family did the other kind of ritual, the phone call to Domino's, and then the agony of the wait. 30 minutes. Not guaranteed, but promised, and there was something thrilling about watching the clock, listening for the car in the driveway, running to the door before anyone else could get there first. For teenagers, Friday night had its own separate universe entirely. It meant staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning with a controller in your hand, running through Mushroom Kingdoms in Super Mario Kart or calling plays in Tecmo Bowl with your best friend sitting cross-legged on the floor beside you. It meant sitting by the radio for hours with a blank cassette tape loaded and your finger hovering over record and pause, waiting, actually waiting, sometimes for hours, for your favorite song to come on so you could catch it before the DJ started talking over the intro. It meant staying up even later for the horror hosts, Elvira with that wicked grin, Joe Bob Briggs cracking jokes before the creature features started, and there was something almost sacred about being the only one awake in the house while the TV cast that blue light across the living room. And if you grew up in the American South, Friday nights in the fall had an entirely different kind of magic. They meant high school football. Not just a game, an event. Entire towns, sometimes thousands of people, would empty out of their homes and pour into the same stadium under the same lights. Grandparents who hadn't been to a game in years would show up. Rival families would sit 20 feet apart and yell at the same referee. For one night a week, the whole town was in the same place, feeling the same thing, for the same reason. But maybe the most powerful memories aren't the loud ones. I think about my grandparents' farm in Georgia, sitting on that screened-in porch on a Friday evening, the radio playing low in the background, my hands shelling beans into a bowl while the sun went down slow and orange over the fields. Nobody was rushing anywhere. Nobody was checking anything. It was just the sound of the radio, the sound of the beans, and the quiet company of people I loved. I didn't understand back then how rare that was. I thought it was just Friday. It took me years to realize that unhurried, undistracted time like that was actually one of the most valuable things a person could have. And somewhere along the way, we lost it, without ever really deciding to. So what happened? Because Friday nights didn't disappear overnight. Nobody woke up one day and canceled them. It was slower than that. It was gradual, almost invisible, the way a tide goes out without you noticing until you look up and the water's just gone. Streaming happened. And on the surface, that sounds like a win. More movies, more shows, more music than any human being could consume in 100 lifetimes, all available in an instant. But here's what nobody talks about: when you remove the friction, you remove the meaning. There's no more drive to the video store, no more physical commitment, no more holding something in your hands that you paid real money for. When every choice is free and instant and reversible, no choice actually matters. We didn't just gain convenience. We quietly lost the weight of anticipation, the thing that made waiting for something feel almost as good as getting it. Think about that blank cassette tape, sitting by the radio for hours just to catch one song. Today you can pull up any song ever recorded in about 2 seconds. That should feel like magic. But it doesn't, not really, because anticipation isn't just an inconvenience we've engineered away, it's a feeling, and it turns out that feeling was doing something important for us. You can't recreate the thrill of waiting in a world specifically built to eliminate waiting. It's not that we chose to lose it. It became structurally impossible to keep. And then there's presence. Actual, physical presence. Delivery apps mean we don't have to leave the house anymore, don't have to negotiate with a sibling over pizza toppings, don't have to sit across a table from another human being while we eat. Social media means we can be virtually surrounded by 1,000 people at once, liking, scrolling, watching everyone else's Friday night unfold in little rectangles, while being completely alone in the room we're actually sitting in. We traded a stadium full of strangers cheering together for a feed full of strangers we'll never meet. We traded the porch and the radio and the beans for a phone that never stops asking for our attention. None of this happened because we wanted to lose something. Nobody chose isolation on purpose. It happened because every convenience, every algorithm, every notification was optimized for engagement, not for connection. And engagement, it turns out, is a very different thing from the feeling we actually used to have on a Friday night. Here's what I think those old Friday nights really were, underneath all the nostalgia. They were America's last remaining campfire. Not a literal one, but the same idea, a moment when millions of people, in 1,000 different towns, doing 1,000 different things, were still somehow doing it together. A family watching a rented movie in Ohio and a town packed into a football stadium in Georgia and a kid recording a song off the radio in California. None of them knew each other, but they were all gathered around the same invisible fire, at the same time, for the same reason. That's what Friday night used to mean. Not a specific activity. A shared feeling, happening everywhere at once. And here's the good news: if you've made it this far feeling a little heavy about all this, the need for that feeling never left us. We didn't evolve past it. We didn't outgrow it. The algorithm didn't take it away because we stopped wanting it, it just stopped handing it to us automatically, the way it used to arrive on its own back when Friday was the only real event on the calendar. That means the fix isn't complicated, even if it isn't easy. It just requires doing something the algorithm will never do for you, which is choosing it on purpose. Put the phone in another room. Go pick out a movie somewhere, anywhere, that isn't a menu of infinite options. Sit down at an actual table with actual food and actual people and actually talk to them. Go to a movie theater and share 2 hours of silence in the dark with a room full of strangers, all laughing or jumping at the same moment. Call somebody instead of texting them. Show up to the game, the porch, the kitchen table, on purpose, because the campfire is still there. It's just waiting for somebody to light it again. And it might as well be you, this Friday.